Question number 36 on the reading portion of College Board's Test 4. How would Payne most likely respond to Burke's statement? So this is a back and forth between the two passages. How would Payne, who is passage 2, think about something Burke said in 30 to 34, passage 1? Realize this is also a quote question, so this is a very complex, layered question. We need to figure out how one guy would view another, and we also need to find a quote that supports the answer. So let's deal with 36. How would Payne most likely respond to this statement 30 to 34? Let's see what 30 to 34 says. Let's see what Burke says, and let's try to think what Payne would think about that, what passage 2 would think about this statement. So this is what Burke believes. As the ends of such a partnership cannot be obtained in many generations, it becomes a partnership not only between those who are living, but between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are to be born. So that's what Burke believes. He believes that the contract between society and its government is a partnership between the dead, the living, and the unborn. How would Payne think about that belief? Well, I know, judging from the thesis of Payne's argument, he thinks that that's an idiotic statement. That the only thing that matters in government, the contract between the government and the people, is the people who are living. The people who are dead make no more decisions, and the people who are born aren't real. So the only people that matter are the people who are living. That's what radical Thomas Paine believes. So he'll think that Edmund Burke is an idiot, that this is not true. The relationship between government does not extend beyond the grave. It only is in the present. So let's see if there's any one of those answer choices. How would Payne react to this? Payne would think that Burke is wrong. He, Payne, A, would assert that the notion of a partnership across generations is less plausible to people of his era than it was to people in the past. This is like a good, bad, smart answer. It sounds good, it's confusing, and you were overwhelmed by its wording and you picked it instead of being critical. Does Payne ever say that the notion of cross-generational partnership is less plausible or is less doable now than it was in the past? Like, well, in the past it was easier to work with generations of the past than it is today. Back then we used to be able to talk to dead people, but now we can't. Is he saying that? He never says that. He never once says anything about what it used to be or what it ought to be. He says currently the people who are living are the only people that determine everything. So he's not saying anything about, this is not a nuanced approach. This is not a nuanced view that Payne would have against Burke's belief of like, well, I see your point, but it's not really that feasible today because like it used to be in the past. He never once makes that distinction. Don't let the College Board put words in your mouth. What about B? He would most likely respond to Burke's statement. Payne would most likely respond to the idea that the government is between the dead, living, and unborn. Payne would argue that there are no politically meaningful links between the dead, living, and unborn. Yes. There are no political meaningful links. There's no link whatsoever between the dead, the unborn, and the present. The only people that matter are the present. What would Payne think about 3034C? He would question the possibility that significant changes to the political system could be accomplished within a single generation. Again, does he ever provide this nuanced, subtle approach by saying, I don't know if we can ever create a new change the political system in one generation? Well, the revolution did. He just witnessed it. If we know history in 1790, they did change a political system in one generation. This is not what he would believe. And it's not what he said. What about D? How would Payne most likely respond to Burke's statement? Payne, would point out that we cannot know what judgments the dead would make about contemporary issues. This is an answer that people settle on because they don't even understand what it's saying. You get confused with A, B, and C, and then you're like, yeah, D, whatever. Remember, never settle, and never settle for answer choice D. Don't think that because D is available after you were confused with A, B, and C, that's therefore going to be the right answer. That's a big pitfall that I see with a lot of people, and I'm noticing it on this test. I'm noticing that they want to stress it in test 4 of the reading of this ability and this comfort to settle, rather than to think hard about what they're actually trying to say. Would Payne say that we cannot know what judgments the dead would make? Is he like, yeah, we just don't know what the dead would make. They wouldn't make any judgment because they're dead. So don't make this assumption like, well, we don't know what they would think. Yeah, we wouldn't know what they would think because they're dead. They don't have any beliefs. There's no anything because they play no role in our decision making in the present. So this is such like a funny answer actually when you read it. Because Payne is now saying, yeah, we don't know what the dead believe because, I don't know. We can't make judgments about what they believe. Yeah, of course we can't because they're dead. It's like such a funny answer. I think the answer is going to be B, and it's the most surface level answer. It's right on the surface. There's nothing that we need to, philosophize about. He's saying that there's no politically meaningful links between the dead, living, and unborn. Only the living matter. Paine thinks that, remember, Burke's belief in the beginning was partnership in government is between the living, dead, and unborn. Paine says there are no meaningful links between the dead, living, and unborn. I think the answer is going to be 36B, but just to be sure, let's take a look at the answers, quotes for 37 to really back it up. Question number 37 on the reading portion of College Board's Test 4. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? So the previous question was, how would Paine respond to Burke's statement in 3034? And Burke said, the government is a partnership between the living, the dead, and the unborn. So Paine would believe that there are no politically meaningful links between the dead, the living, and the unborn. Answer choice B. But let's forget about the answer choices for 36. Let's try to answer a very particular question. What would Paine think about Burke's statement? And we need to find a quote, A, B, C, D, in 37, that tells us what Paine would believe about Burke's statement. And again, we think that Paine would be like, Burke, you're an idiot. You're wrong. There is no link between the dead, the living, and the unborn, which supports kind of what we thought with B. But let's see if we can answer it without any of these answer choices for 36. Let's see 41 to 43. Does this tell us what Paine would believe about Burke? Every age and generation must be as free to act in itself in all cases as the ages and generations which preceded it. I feel like that's a warm. We're getting warmer. Because we're saying every generation deserves to act as freely as its past generation was able to act. I feel like that's getting close to saying that the individual in the present matters a lot, but he doesn't necessarily say anything directly about the living, the dead, and the unborn. Because notice these answer choices, living, dead, unborn. So I feel like that is talking about the present, but it's not talking about that exactly in 30 to 34. Let's leave it. 43 to 45, does this talk about what Paine would believe about Burke? 43 to 45. The vanity and presumption of governing beyond the grave is the most ridiculous and insolent of all tyrannies. Ooh, this is a very hard question, because this is now talking about the vanity of governing beyond the grave. But realize what this is talking about, as we're about to see. This is a good bad answer. I understand if you pick this. You probably got 36 right and 37 wrong. If you got 37 wrong. And you might have picked B. But realize it's only talking about the dead. The vanity and presumption of governing beyond the grave. It doesn't talk about the living and the dead. Or maybe it does, but it doesn't talk about those who are yet to be born. Interesting. What about C, 56, 58? It is the living and not the dead that are to be accommodated. Ooh, such a good, this is a fantastic question. This is Question Hall of Fame material right here. I'm putting this right now in the Question Hall of Fame. This is a really hard reading test, by the way. Really hard, really insightful. If you analyze this test on test 4, you'll be good to go. C is a really good bad answer, because once again, you might think, yeah, it seems good. Is the living and not the dead that be accommodated? And I bet actually most people pick C for this answer, 37. But you're wrong. You're wrong. Because what about D? What possible obligation then can exist between them, those who have quitted the world and those who are not yet arrived in it? What rule or principle can be laid down that two non-entities, the one out of existence, the dead, and the other not in, yet to be born, and who never can meet in this world, that the one should control the other to the end of time? Interesting. Notice what that one does that the other ones don't. Even though it's not as clear-cut as C, it is the living and not the dead that are to be accommodated. Or even B, 43 to 45, right? The presumption of governing beyond the grave is ridiculous. Burke, though, says the partnership is between the living, the dead, and those who are yet to be born. And D is the only one that talks about the living, dead, and unborn. Whereas B and C and even A only talk about the living versus the dead. A, living versus dead. The B, living versus dead. C, living and not the dead. But D is the only one that comes full circle, even if it's obliquely, to talk about the living, the dead, and the unborn, because it mentions all three of them. This is an excellent, excellent quote question. And this is something for us to think about right now. Identify when answer choices are similar to each other. Because if answer choices are very similar to each other, in this case I'm thinking B and C, they're almost identical in what they're trying to say, neither can be the right answer. You're missing something. It's not talking about the full picture. They want you to think between two answer choices that are not quite there, because then you are exhausted by the time you get to an answer choice that's kind of obscurely, obliquely talking about the connection between everything. You're like, and you write it off. And you pick the answer, you pick the low-hanging fruit. You pick C, right? Or you pick B. Or maybe if you're smart and you're like, oh, they didn't get me, you pick A. And then the one that actually encompasses everything that we talk about is the one thing that we don't even realize could be the answer. The answer number 37 is going to be D. That's the only answer choice that talks about the living, the dead, and the unborn, as Burke discussed. That nicely matches up with B for 36. Paine would believe that there is no politically meaningful links between the dead, the living, and the unborn. Notice how he doesn't just say dead and dead and living. He says dead, living, and unborn. We need to have a quote that has every dead, living, and unborn in it. Amazing question. Answer 36 is going to be B. Answer to 37, D.